I still remember the way he said it. I want a divorce. No warning. No warmth. Just those 4 syllables, delivered flat like a business transaction, while I sat on the couch, my hands cradling the swell of my 6-month belly. I blinked at him, thinking I'd misheard. Surely this wasn't real. Surely, no one leaves their pregnant wife in the middle of winter, with baby clothes still in their plastic packaging and prenatal vitamins scattered across the counter. But he didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just stood there with his coat zipped up, keys in hand, as if this had been a long commute and he was finally ready to exit. I didn't cry at first. That came later, in waves so deep I didn't know where the grief ended and I began. I remember holding my stomach that night, whispering through broken sobs, "I'm sorry. I don't know why he left. But I'm still here. I'll always be here." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. Screamed. Every sound in the apartment felt louder. The hum of the fridge, the wind tapping the windows, the ticking of a clock we never hung on the wall. It echoed what I feared most, that I was now alone. Alone in a moment meant to be shared. Alone with this tiny heartbeat fluttering inside me. My thoughts unraveled quickly. What will people say? How will I raise a child like this? Why wasn't I enough for him to stay? I had imagined many difficult scenarios before birth. Stretch marks, labor pain, losing sleep, but never this. Never him walking out of our story halfway through. I stared at the nursery door, still unpainted, and something inside me cracked. Not in the way glass breaks, but in the way earth splits before something new can grow. That night, I fell asleep with my hand resting over the life I still carried. And when I woke up, I whispered to myself, not with certainty, but with a strange kind of fragile hope. He left me broken, but not alone. The nights were the hardest. Not because of the back pain or the swollen ankles or the kicks that came like waves in the quiet, but because the silence had teeth. It bit into me when the world fell asleep, and I was left staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything changed so fast. I would lay there with my arms wrapped around my stomach, rocking side to side like maybe I could soothe the both of us, this baby and the woman carrying him, equally lost. No one tells you how pregnancy feels when you go through it alone. No one prepares you for the silence after a door closes and a man chooses freedom over family. There were no warm hands on my back during contractions. No lazy Sunday planning baby names. No photos of us painting the nursery in laughter. Just me. And the weight of a body I didn't recognize anymore. Some days I hated myself for needing him, for hoping he'd walk back in. I would catch my reflection in the mirror. Puffy eyes, bloated face, stretch marks tracing across my belly, and wonder, was I not enough? Was I too soft? Too emotional? Too much of something or not enough of anything? And then came the voices. The whispers behind well-meaning smiles. She should have known he wasn't serious. I mean, who gets left that far along? Poor girl. That baby won't have a father. Even my own family didn't know what to say. My mother spoke in sighs. My sister avoided my eyes. Every checkup at the clinic was a reminder of absence. I watched other women walk in, hands held tightly by men with proud eyes. I smiled at them. But every smile was stitched with envy. I began doing everything alone. Grocery shopping, building the crib, watching birth videos, reading forums at 3 a.m. trying to calm my spiraling fears. What if I can't afford to raise him? What if I mess this up? What if I fall apart? There were nights I cried so hard the baby stopped kicking, like even he needed stillness. There were days I screamed into pillows, punched the floor, prayed until my throat burned. And then there were moments I felt nothing. Just emptiness. Cold, quiet, endless. But somewhere in that darkness, something began to flicker. It wasn't hope yet. It was smaller than that. It was survival. I started talking to my baby out loud. Hey little one, you feel that? That's your mama fighting to keep going. Sometimes I said it with tears in my throat. Other times with fire in my chest. I stopped pretending to be okay. I let myself feel everything, even the ugly things. The rage, the shame, the regret. Because pretending was heavier than the pain itself. And somewhere between one sob and the next, I realized something. I wasn't crying for him anymore. Not for the man who left. Not for the promises he broke. I was crying for me. For the girl I used to be. For the woman I was becoming. For the mother who would rise from the cracks she was breaking through. I cried for him. Until I started crying for me. It happened during a routine ultrasound. I hadn't even wanted to go. I almost skipped it, honestly. I told myself it was just a checkup. Nothing special. Just another appointment I'd have to walk into alone, surrounded by couples holding hands and talking about baby names and stroller colors. But I went. Not for me but for him, the tiny life still growing inside me. I lay there in the dim room, cold gel on my stomach, the technician quietly moving the wand across my skin. I was numb, barely present, until the screen flickered and a sound filled the room. Heartbeat. Strong. Fast. Alive. My breath caught. I stared at the pulsing shape on the monitor. I could see the outline of his little body, the curve of his head, the flicker of movement that would someday be his first steps. That's when it hit me. Not like a soft realization, but like thunder in my chest. He's here. He's real. And he's mine. Not ours. Not anymore. In that sterile little room, something inside me shifted. Not in anger. Not in grief. But in choice. I will not let his absence define my child's beginning. That night, I went home and began to clear space. Literally and emotionally. I packed up the things he left behind. The hoodie that still hung behind the door, the photos on the fridge, the little notes he once wrote that I used to reread to feel loved. I didn't cry. I just folded it all into a box and taped it shut. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up his contact, and blocked him. Phone. Email. Every social media account. If he didn't want to be here, then he wouldn't get to hover over my life like a shadow. I started caring for myself in a way I hadn't before. Not to feel pretty or prove a point. But because this child needed a mother who could stand. A mother who could breathe deeply and hold them when storms came. I joined a prenatal yoga class online. I started journaling at night. Not just about the pain but about the future. I wrote letters to my unborn son. I wrote about the kind of mother I wanted to be. Not perfect but present. Not fearless, but fierce enough to keep showing up. I even called a therapist. First I felt silly. Weak. But each session felt like clearing debris from a collapsed house. There was space again. Light even. I found small joys. Folding baby clothes, humming lullabies I'd forgotten I knew, feeling the baby kick after a good meal and laughing out loud, alone, like a secret only we shared. This child, my son, wasn't the end of my story. He was the reason I turned the page. This baby isn't a burden. He's my reason. And from that day forward, I didn't walk for the man who left. I walked, stronger and slower and with more intention, for us. For the life I was creating. For the woman I was becoming. Because while he ran from love, I was carrying it. They say you forget the pain once it's over. I haven't. It started at 2:47 a.m. A low ache in my back, sharp and steady, that made me sit up in bed. First I thought it was just another false alarm. My body had been tricking me for days. But then it came again, stronger this time. Deeper. My breath hitched. I reached for the hospital bag I'd packed weeks earlier and took one last look around the apartment. It was quiet but not heavy. There was no man fumbling for his keys or shouting, "Let's go!" in a panic. Just me, steadying my breath and whispering to my baby, "We've got this." The Uber ride was long and silent, my hands gripping the seat, counting between contractions. The driver kept glancing at me through the mirror, concern in his eyes. I gave him a tight smile. I didn't need pity. I needed to stay focused. By the time I was admitted, the pain was a thunderstorm inside my body. Hours blurred into one another, contractions crashing, my breath shallow, sweat pouring down my neck. The hospital room buzzed with nurses' footsteps and beeping machines. I was surrounded but felt alone in the most intimate way. Each contraction pulled something raw from me. Not just physically but emotionally. I thought of him. of the hands that once held mine, of the promises, of the space beside me that should have been filled. In the middle of one contraction, I screamed louder than I meant to. A nurse came rushing over. I shook my head, tears sliding sideways off my cheeks. "It's not just the pain," I whispered. "I know," she said gently, brushing hair from my forehead. "But you're doing this. You're doing this beautifully." And I was. With every scream, every breath, every clenched jaw, I was birthing more than a baby. I was birthing a version of myself I didn't know I had. At one point, they offered me a mirror to see the baby crowning. I refused. I didn't want to see it happen. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to remember that I did this. That I faced it. All of it. Then came the final push. The nurse counted. 1, 2, 3. And I pushed with everything I had, all the pain, all the heartbreak, all the nights alone bundled into that single act of defiance. And then silence. Pause. Breath. And suddenly a cry. A cry. Shrill, piercing, perfect. My baby was here. Tears flooded my eyes before I even saw him. My arms reached before my words could. They laid him on my chest, and the world stopped. He was warm and squirming and louder than I'd ever imagined. I sobbed, the kind of sob that shakes your whole soul. I looked down at this little face, this miracle, this proof that even in absence life grows. And I whispered into his tiny ear, through tears and cracked lips. He left me, and still I brought life. I held him as though we'd always known each other, because in some way we had. He was with me through every night I cried, every morning I chose to keep going. He heard my heartbeat when it was broken, and now he had one of his own. The doctor congratulated me. The nurses smiled. But it wasn't until I was alone again, in the dim quiet of the recovery room, that I truly let it settle. He wasn't there. He hadn't called. He hadn't asked. He would never know what this moment felt like. I held my baby close, pressed a kiss to his forehead, and whispered softly, "He'll never know what he lost." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel broken. Felt powerful. I had carried the weight of abandonment, of shame, of loneliness, and still I gave birth to love. Not just a child but a woman reborn. And no one, especially not him, could take that from me. They say motherhood changes you, but no one told me how much it would rebuild me. The nights were long. There were times I walked the hallway at 3 a.m. with a crying baby against my chest, my own tears matching his. I learned to function on 2 hours of sleep and cold coffee. My body was tired, my mind foggy, but my heart was beginning to beat again. Those early days were a blur of diapers, feedings, and tiny victories. The first time he gripped my finger. The first time his eyes found mine and really saw me. It wasn't just him bonding to me. I was bonding to myself again, piece by piece. Motherhood wasn't easy, but it was mine. And after being abandoned, after being underestimated, that meant everything. When my baby napped, I began reclaiming the quiet. I started small, watching free tutorials online, brushing up on a skill I'd almost forgotten I had. Design. I'd always loved creating things, but never thought I was good enough to turn it into something real. But with a baby in one arm and my laptop balanced on the other, I started saying yes to tiny freelance jobs. A logo here. Social media post there. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned reminded me that I wasn't helpless. I wasn't stuck. I was starting over. Eventually, I opened an Instagram account. Not to show off but to share. I posted about single motherhood, about healing, about finding strength in the silence. I was honest about the hard days, the messy nights, the loneliness. But I also shared the victories. The first steps. The first client. The first time my son said, "Mama," and knew exactly what it meant. And people listened. They responded. They messaged me saying things like, "Thank you for making me feel less alone. You gave me the courage to leave. I didn't think I could do this, until I saw you doing it." I went from surviving to inspiring. And that feeling, nothing compares. My side hustle grew. Clients referred me to others. I started offering consultations, then digital products, then speaking on live chats and virtual panels about resilience and rebuilding. One day I looked at my PayPal balance and cried. Not because it was huge, but because it was enough. Could breathe again. My son was growing too. Strong, curious, full of light. We danced in the kitchen, had pancake mornings, and read stories before bed. He didn't ask where his father was. He just knew he was loved. Completely. And I was no longer the girl crying on the bathroom floor. I was a mother. Business owner. A woman who'd rebuilt herself from the ashes of heartbreak. Support came in unexpected ways. An older client became something more than a client. She became a mentor. She reminded me to rest, to dream bigger, to forgive myself. A neighbor who always waved from across the hall became my emergency babysitter and late-night coffee friend. She held my baby like he was her own, and held me when I didn't know I needed it. And yes, love peeked through the cracks too. There was someone kind, patient, someone who didn't see me as damaged, but as powerful. He met me after the storm, when I was already standing on my own 2 feet. He didn't rescue me. He simply walked beside me. I didn't need him. That was the beauty of it. But I chose to let him in, slowly, carefully, after I had already chosen myself. One night, long after the baby was asleep, I sat at my desk answering emails. My laptop hummed softly. A warm cup of tea in my hand. Bills paid. Baby fed. Future unfolding. I looked around and realized, this was the life I built from scratch. With blistered hands and sleepless eyes. With heartbreak in my rearview mirror and my baby in my arms. I wasn't waiting for anyone to save me anymore. I had already become everything we needed. Started with a message. After nearly 2 years of silence, he appeared in my inbox like a ghost that finally realized it still had unfinished business. The name alone sent a chill through me. But not from fear, not anymore. Curiosity tugged at me. I opened the message. Hey, I saw your page. You look different. I didn't know you were doing all this. I've been thinking about you. About us. There was no mention of the child. Not yet. Just the typical breadcrumb trail of a man realizing too late what he lost. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later we crossed paths. Of all places, the park. I was with my son, pushing him gently on the swings. His laugh was loud and bright, carried by the breeze. I felt his joy like sunlight on my skin. And then I heard a voice behind me. Is that him? Turned. He looked older. Not by age but by regret. His eyes scanned me, my body, my face, my strength. Then they landed on the boy with the same shade of brown in his eyes. A recognition flickered across his face. He stepped closer. He's beautiful. Yes, he is, I replied, standing tall. There was an awkward pause, the kind that chokes the air. He looked like he was searching for the right line, the one that might undo years of silence. I made mistakes, he finally said. I was scared. But maybe we can talk. Maybe I could be part of his life. Yours too, maybe. I held my son's hand, knelt beside him to fix his little cap, and then stood eye to eye with the man who once walked away from everything I became. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply said, we're not your regret to fix. His eyes dropped. You chose absence, I continued, when we needed presence. You don't get to show up now and rewrite that story. He tried again, something about responsibility, time lost, maybe doing the right thing now. But it was already over. I turned to my son. Ready to go, baby. He nodded. I scooped him up and walked away. Not out of bitterness. Not to prove anything. But because I no longer lived in the place where he left me. He watched us walk toward a life that no longer included him. And that was the truest justice of all. I used to think revenge had to be loud. That it had to burn. That it meant making someone sorry. But I learned that the strongest kind of revenge is quiet. It happens in healing. In peace. In building something beautiful after someone tried to break you. It wasn't easy. None of this was. There were days I doubted I'd ever smile without bitterness again. Nights I curled around my belly, crying for a man who walked away without flinching. And yet, here I am. Here we are. I look at my son now, his tiny hand in mine, his laughter echoing through our small apartment like music. He doesn't know the whole story yet. He doesn't know what I went through to bring him into this world, or what I had to lose to make room for the life we have now. But one day he will. And when he does, I won't tell him about the pain with resentment in my voice. I'll tell him about the strength, the fight to stay kind, to stay soft, to stay whole when it would have been easier to stay broken. He was the reason I didn't break. He was the heartbeat that kept mine steady. He was never a consequence. He was the gift that came wrapped in chaos. And now, he's the joy I carry on my hip, the reason I smile when I pass the mirror, the reason I rise even when I'm tired. Sometimes people ask me if I ever saw him again. If he tried to come back, apologize, fix what he ruined. Yes, he did. And no, I didn't let him. Because I finally understood. He didn't just walk out on me. He walked out on this. On the laughter, on the milestones, on the quiet victories. And you don't get to walk back into the life you abandoned once it shines. He left thinking I was weak. I proved strength is carrying life, and never looking back. My revenge wasn't becoming someone better. It was becoming someone whole. Someone who doesn't need closure or payback or permission to thrive. I don't need him to know what he missed. 'Cause I know what I gained. And every single day, as I raise this joyful, wild-hearted boy who calls me Mama, I am reminded, I didn't just survive. I rose. And that is the kind of revenge that lasts forever.